So as some of you may already know, Jordan Peterson has been following a carnivore diet for the last year now, and according to Jordan, he eats nothing but steak and the occasional can of Sprite, or ginger ale. And Jordan seems to be pretty certain that his meat and soda diet is doing wonders for his health because he made this ridiculous post on Twitter where he claimed that after following the carnivore diet for 1 year, his blood work is all normal, no vitamin deficiencies, he's lost weight, and all immunological symptoms are gone. Okay, well, first thing I want to point out here is that this is an anecdotal claim, and Jordan didn't even share actual photos of his blood test results. He's only claiming that his blood tests all came back as normal. So I consider these claims to be rather dubious, especially his claim about all of his immunological symptoms being gone. I could be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, Jordan has never been diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder. So for him to claim that the carnivore diet cured all of his autoimmune symptoms, that's an extremely misleading statement. And I'm sure Jordan's response to that would be,
well, wait a second here. I never said I had an autoimmune disorder. I said all of my immunological symptoms are gone. I don't know what any of those words mean, but that is not what I said. This is a typical tactic of the far left. They keep pointing out why I'm wrong, even though I had no idea of what I was talking about in the first place. And that is not good. This type of behavior led to mass incarceration and deaths under the Soviet system. I recommend you all read Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago to find out how this behavior leads to mass chaos.
So Jordan is not able to accurately self-diagnose himself, nor does he have the expertise to interpret his blood test results. He wouldn't even share his blood test results publicly, which I think says a lot, yet he is trying to convince you to eat one of the worst diets imaginable based on his own self-diagnosis and anecdotal claims. Even if we were to take Jordan Peterson at his word and his blood test results were all normal, well, normal isn't healthy, Jordan. The majority of the population is not following a healthy diet and lifestyle, so when your blood work comes back as normal, that means you have an increased risk of chronic disease. So this was a study published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, and the authors concluded that the optimal range for LDL cholesterol is 50 to 70 milligrams per deciliter. This finding was based on several regression analyses where atherosclerosis is predicted not to progress once LDL cholesterol falls below 70 milligrams per deciliter. The chances of suffering a first heart attack are also minimized once LDL is below 60 milligrams per deciliter, and if you are trying to prevent a second heart attack, lowering your LDL cholesterol to 30 milligrams per deciliter offers the best protection. So essentially, the lower your LDL cholesterol score is, the better, but the normal physiological range appears to be between 50 to 70 milligrams per deciliter, which is the range where atherosclerosis does not occur and where heart disease events are minimized. Well, your average American has an LDL cholesterol score of 130 milligrams per deciliter, which is roughly double the healthy, normal physiological range. So if Jordan Peterson is going to claim that his blood work came back as normal, then we can guess that his LDL cholesterol is around 130 milligrams per deciliter, which puts you at a massively increased risk of heart disease. Your LDL cholesterol is about double what it should be, and this is because of all the saturated fat and cholesterol you are eating on your carnivore diet. But here you are, promoting a diet which massively increases your risk of heart disease to your audience, or is heart disease, the leading cause of death worldwide, not something we should be concerned with, Jordan?
Well, it depends on what you mean by heart and what you mean by disease. If you mean heart disease in a metaphorical sense, where heart is the human soul and disease is the chaos and corruption of the human soul, then I don't see how a carnivore diet could corrupt mankind's soul and lead us down a path to chaos and destruction through ideological possession. But if you're talking about heart disease in a medical, scientific sense, well, then I don't really know anything about that, really.
And of course, subsequent research has confirmed these findings. Another study published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology found that there is a direct linear relationship between LDL cholesterol and prevalence and severity of atherosclerosis. So the higher your LDL cholesterol score, the higher the chances you'll have atherosclerosis, and the worse it will be. The only group where atherosclerosis was completely non-existent were those with an LDL cholesterol score between 50 to 60 milligrams per deciliter. And I know that LDL and heart disease is still a contentious topic somehow, and I have heard Jordan Peterson claim that there isn't really any good evidence that cholesterol is related to heart disease. Well, you're dead wrong. This was a paper published in the European Heart Journal, and it's a consensus statement from the European Atherosclerotic Society, where they reviewed the totality of evidence from genetic studies, prospective epidemiological cohort studies, Mendelian randomization studies, and randomized trials of LDL-lowering therapies, and unsurprisingly, they found that separate meta-analyses of over 200 prospective cohort studies, Mendelian randomization studies, and randomized trials, including more than 2 million participants with over 20 million person-years of follow-up and over 150,000 cardiovascular events, demonstrate a remarkably consistent, dose-dependent, log-linear association between the absolute magnitude of exposure of the vasculature to LDL-C and the risk of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, and this effect appears to increase with increasing duration of exposure to LDL-C. So there's really no arguing this, Jordan. Your diet is loaded with saturated fat and cholesterol, and of course this is driving up your serum cholesterol scores, which is massively increasing your risk of heart disease. So for you to recommend this diet to anyone is completely irresponsible.
Well, it depends on what you mean by irresponsible. If by irresponsible you mean I made misleading, uninformed statements that could have disastrous health consequences to those who follow my advice, well, then yes. But if by irresponsible you mean that I seem to have lost my train of thought.
Another huge problem with the carnivore diet is that it is completely devoid of fiber, and of course that's because you don't eat plants. So this was a paper covering several systematic reviews and meta-analyses, and it involved just under 135 million person-years of data from 185 prospective studies and 58 clinical trials with 4,635 adult participants. Observational data suggests a 15 to 30% decrease in all-cause and cardiovascular-related mortality and incidence of coronary heart disease, stroke incidence and mortality, type 2 diabetes, and colorectal cancer when comparing the highest dietary fiber consumers with the lowest consumers. Clinical trials also showed significantly lower body weight, systolic blood pressure, and total cholesterol when comparing higher with lower intakes of dietary fiber, and dose-response curves suggested that higher intakes of dietary fiber could confer an even greater benefit to protect against cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes, and colorectal and breast cancer. So again, according to the best research available, fiber is massively beneficial for human health. Eating more fiber significantly reduces your risk of dying from all causes, and it prevents you from developing life-threatening chronic diseases. But here you are promoting a diet that has absolutely no fiber, and you think this ridiculous diet is healthy because of your own self-diagnosis. How stupid do you think that is, honestly? And look, Jordan, if you want to slowly kill yourself and ruin your own health, that's fine, but maybe you shouldn't encourage other people to do that too. But I'm sure Jordan would just say,
well, just because a carnivore diet would lead to disease and death doesn't mean a vegan diet would fare any better. You see, veganism is just an attempt to replace God in the dominance hierarchy, and much like communism in the 20th century, people thought it was a compassionate ideology. And you might think that you're being compassionate by being vegan and not killing any animals, but once ideological possession takes over, it is a slippery slope to genocide and chaos. And this makes evolutionary sense, you know. Imagine yourself 1,000,000 years ago where you had to figure out how to defend yourself against snakes up in the trees, and you see a guy who learned how to grab a stick and whack away the snakes, and you can imagine he'd be pretty popular with the ladies. And then you see some other guy who learned how to rub two sticks together to make fire, and he's getting all the attention from the ladies too. And you're just sitting there with your broccoli, not knowing what to do with yourself, and you're not able to compete with the other males. And then you decide to just give up. You drop out of university, you drop out of society, and then you just drop out of life altogether. And all because of the ideological possession of veganism. And this has led to complete chaos, which is not good.
And of course, there are a number of other issues with the carnivore diet, but I thought I'd just mention two of the biggest ones here. The increased risk of heart disease from eating saturated fat and cholesterol, and just the lack of fiber in the diet. And Jordan Peterson's daughter is the one who encouraged him to follow this ridiculous, unhealthy diet, and I reached out to her, and we're going to set up a discussion in about a month or so. So that will be interesting. Stay tuned for an update on that. And if you like this video, maybe consider supporting me on Patreon or through my website. I have some funding perks you may find interesting. If you're looking for clothing, then check out the Vegan Gain store. Also, if you're looking for online coaching, check out Quality Gains. He offers customized diet and training plans, and you can get 10% off by using the discount code VG10. Links are in the description down below, and as always, keep making those vegan gains.
Beef. What a relief. When will this poisonous product cease? This is another public service announcement. You can believe it or you can doubt it. Let us begin now with the cow. The way it gets to your plate and how